Hezekiah became king when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. He did right in the sight of the Lord, in accordance with everything that David his forefather had done. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of the Lord, which his father had closed, and repaired them, and replaced the gold overlay. He brought in the priests and Levites, and gathered them into the square on the east. Then he said to them, Levites, listen to me. Now dedicate yourselves, and consecrate the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers, and get the filth of idol worship out of the holy place. For our fathers have been unfaithful, and have done evil in the sight of the Lord our God, and they have abandoned him, and have turned their face away from the dwelling place of the Lord, and have turned their backs toward him. Now it is in my heart to make a covenant, solemn agreement, with the Lord God of Israel, so that his burning anger will turn away from us. My sons, do not be negligent and careless now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand in his presence, to attend to his service, and to be his ministers, and burn incense. Then the Levites arose. They gathered their brothers, fellow Levites, together, consecrated themselves, and went in to cleanse the house of the Lord, as the king had commanded by the words of the Lord. Then King Hezekiah arose early, and assembled the officials of the city, and went up to the house of the Lord. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats for a sin offering for the kingdom, the sanctuary, and Judah. Then they brought the male goats for the sin offering before the king and the assembly, and they laid their hands on them to symbolize the transference of their sin. The priests slaughtered them and cleansed the altar from sin with their blood to atone for all Israel. Hezekiah stationed the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals, with harps, and with lyres. The Levites stood with the musical instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. Then Hezekiah gave the order to offer the burnt offering on the altar. And when the burnt offering began, the song of the Lord also began with the trumpets, accompanied by the instruments of David, king of Israel. The entire congregation worshipped. The singers also sang, and the trumpets sounded. All this continued until the burnt offering was finished. When the burnt offerings were completed, the king and all who were present with him bowed down and worshipped God. Then Hezekiah said, Now you have consecrated yourselves to the Lord. Approach and bring sacrifices and thank offerings into the house of the Lord. And the assembly brought in sacrifices and thank offerings. But there were too few priests, and they were unable to skin all the burnt offerings. So, until the other priests had consecrated themselves, their brothers, the Levites, helped them until the work was done. Then Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced, because of what God had prepared for the people. For the thing came about suddenly. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and to Judah to come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover feast to the Lord God of Israel. For the king and his officials and all the assembly in Jerusalem had decided to celebrate the Passover in the 2nd month, since they could not celebrate it at the time because a significant number of priests had not consecrated themselves, nor had the people assembled at Jerusalem. Thus, the decision to set a new time pleased the king and the entire assembly. So they decided to circulate a proclamation throughout Israel that the people were to come to celebrate the Passover to the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem. For they had not celebrated it in great numbers, as it was prescribed, for a long time. The hand of God was on Judah to give them one heart, to do that which the king and the officials had commanded by the word of the Lord. Now many people were gathered at Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the 2nd month. It was a very large assembly, and there were many in the assembly who had not consecrated themselves, that has become ceremonially clean and free from all sin. So the Levites had to slaughter the Passover lambs for everyone who was not clean, in order to make them holy for the Lord. For the majority of the people had not purified themselves, and yet they ate the Passover, contrary to what had been prescribed. For Hezekiah had prayed for them, saying, "May the good Lord pardon everyone who sets his heart to seek God, the God of his fathers, even though it is not in accordance with the ceremonial purification rules of the sanctuary." So the Lord listened to Hezekiah and healed the people of their uncleanness. So the people ate for the appointed 7 days, sacrificing peace offerings and giving thanks to the Lord God of their fathers. So there was great joy in Jerusalem, because there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem since the time of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Then the priests and Levites stood and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came up to his holy dwelling place in heaven.